People once trusted maps as if they were promises, even when the oceans were wider than imagination and blank spaces whispered questions that knowing could answer with confidence. What happens, you might wonder, when brave travelers follow drawings that shrink continents, stretch seas, and quietly ignore storms, monsters, and the simple fact that nobody had been there before? This story begins in a world where certainty was expensive, curiosity was risky, and courage often traveled ahead of accuracy, carrying supplies, hopes, and a surprising amount of misunderstanding. Maps claimed the world was smaller, friendlier, and more predictable than it truly was, which encouraged bold plans while hiding dangers behind neat lines and elegant lettering. As we step into this journey together, notice how confidence and confusion walk side by side, because believing a map felt safer than admitting how little was actually known. Early explorers were not reckless dreamers alone, but practical people balancing ambition with survival while trusting tools that mixed observation, rumor, and hopeful guessing. The conflict arrived quickly because human curiosity pushed against natural limits, and each decision to sail farther risked food shortages, angry crews, and unseen coastlines. In bustling ports, shipbuilders worked carefully, adapting vessels for journeys longer than tradition advised, while merchants calculated profits based on distances that existed only on parchment. Sailors listened to experienced captains describe coastlines they had never personally seen, trusting memory and reputation more than proof, since written records were rare and travel was slow. Maps showed elegant curves where coastlines should be jagged, and islands appeared exactly where sailors hoped they would be, which was comforting right up until reality disagreed. Our journey pauses in workshops where mapmakers combined ancient texts with travelers' tales, smoothing contradictions so the final image looked believable, even when truth remained incomplete. For ordinary people, these maps shaped dreams since a smaller world seemed more reachable, making distant riches and wonders feel just one brave voyage away. Rulers examined charts eagerly, seeing opportunities for trade and power, while quietly ignoring how uncertainty could turn grand plans into expensive disasters. Ships departed with blessings and celebrations, their crews confident that skill and guidance would overcome whatever gaps existed between ink and ocean. Once at sea, the mismatch between expectation and experience appeared subtly when familiar stars shifted position and winds behaved differently than described. Navigators adjusted constantly, relying on observation and instinct when maps offered no help, discovering that flexibility mattered more than strict obedience to instructions. Daily life aboard ship followed routines shaped by necessity, where sailors measured time by bells and distance by patience rather than precise calculation. The storyteller notices how courage grew not from certainty, but from shared commitment, because turning back felt worse than moving forward into the unknown. Each unexpected current or coastline forced crews to reinterpret their maps, transforming them from guides into suggestions. In these moments, authority shifted subtly from paper to people as experienced sailors gained influence through practical knowledge. Fear traveled quietly through conversations, not dramatic or loud, but present whenever supplies dwindled or landmarks failed to appear. The ocean itself became a teacher, correcting assumptions through storms, calm stretches, and endless horizons that challenged every estimate. Explorers learned that scale was deceptive, since days of sailing could still reveal nothing, contradicting confident predictions made before departure. Some crews encountered islands unmarked on any chart, proving that discovery and correction happened simultaneously. Each new sighting raised questions about what else might be missing, encouraging humility alongside wonder. Maps were sometimes updated mid-journey, scribbled with notes, arrows, and corrections that reflected lived experience rather than theory. Back home, families imagined progress according to reported distances, unaware that reality refused to fit neatly into updates sent months later. The storyteller guides us through tense decisions, where captains chose between following the map faithfully or trusting signs only nature provided. Navigation instruments improved slowly, but during this era, judgment mattered more than technology. Every successful adjustment strengthened belief in human adaptability, even as it exposed the flaws of inherited knowledge. Cultural encounters occurred unexpectedly when sailors reached inhabited lands earlier or later than planned, challenging assumptions about geography and humanity. Trade discussions unfolded with gestures and curiosity since language barriers mirrored the cartographic ones already familiar. These moments revealed that exploration was not only about land, but about expanding understanding beyond comfortable boundaries. Storms punish mistakes harshly, reminding crews that optimism could not control nature. When ships survived these trials, confidence returned, not in the maps themselves, but in the ability to endure uncertainty. The storyteller reflects gently that wrong maps did not prevent discovery and sometimes encouraged it by making bold attempts seem manageable. Backtracking became part of progress as explorers revised goals without abandoning purpose. Time blurred aboard ships, turning weeks into measures of resilience rather than distance. Food, water, and morale demanded constant attention, shaping decisions as strongly as ambition ever did. Each course correction was a quiet admission that knowledge grows through error. The ocean connected distant regions long before maps understood how, creating pathways that existed before they were named. As stories return home, they clash with established charts, forcing mapmakers to reconsider trusted sources. Some errors were corrected quickly, while others lingered for generations, protected by tradition and pride. Exploration revealed patterns slowly, showing that understanding the world required patience across lifetimes. The storyteller invites us to notice how bravery often relied on hope rather than accuracy. Children in port towns grew up hearing tales shaped by exaggeration and truth, inspired by journeys that began with flawed assumptions. Maps, once symbols of certainty, became records of learning, layered with revisions and crossed out mistakes. This era taught that adventure thrives not because maps are right, but because humans dare to move beyond them. Systems of knowledge evolved as shared experience replaced isolated authority. Each voyage added fragments to a larger picture, though completion always stayed just out of reach. Explorers returned changed, carrying not only goods, but humility earned through uncertainty. The world felt larger and smaller at once as distances were reimagined and connections multiplied. The storyteller continues walking forward, where exploration shifts from daring guesses toward tested routes. Yet curiosity never disappears, even as accuracy improves. The early journeys remind us that discovery begins when confidence meets correction. Maps slowly caught up with reality, but imagination always stayed ahead. As this part of the story settles, the sea remains open, inviting further journeys shaped by lessons learned the hard way. Movement did not arrive as a dramatic leap, but as a steady widening of attention because each new landscape he encountered felt less like discovery and more like recognition, as though his inner maps were finally touching the real world. He began to travel with notebooks that absorbed humidity, dust, and hurried thoughts, and, while others focused on destinations, he lingered on transitions, noting how forests thinned, colors shifted, and sounds softened without announcing themselves. These gradual changes fascinated him more than landmarks, because they confirmed his belief that meaning lived between points rather than at them. Fatigue accompanied this way of seeing, since constant observation required patience and emotional availability, yet exhaustion never fully muted his curiosity. Writing became heavier with detail and lighter with certainty as his sentences stretched to hold relationships instead of conclusions. He felt increasingly responsible for accuracy, not out of fear, but because careless description could fracture delicate truths he sensed everywhere. Encounters with other thinkers energized him selectively, since he preferred conversations that unfolded slowly and tolerated silence. Disagreement rarely disturbed him, though oversimplification created quiet irritation that lingered long after polite exchanges ended. Nature continued teaching without speaking, offering lessons in balance, interdependence, and quiet persistence. He noticed how human systems mirrored natural ones imperfectly, often forcing order where adaptation would have served better. This realization deepened his inner conflict because admiration for human ingenuity mixed with concern about its blindness. Moments of awe remained frequent, especially when observation aligned suddenly with understanding. Those moments arrived unexpectedly, like light breaking through cloud, brief yet reshaping everything around them. He learned to trust such insights without rushing to explain them fully. Humor survived as a gentle undercurrent expressed through patient irony rather than sharp commentary. Even in formal settings, he retained a sense of play, delighted by curiosity that refused hierarchy. His writing grew more ambitious, attempting to weave science, emotion, and experience into a single voice. Readers, though unseen, began to feel present in his mind, shaping his care with language. The act of explanation transformed into an act of invitation rather than instruction. Time felt elastic during periods of intense observation, compressing days into insights and stretching minutes into contemplation. Loneliness returned occasionally, not from isolation, but from carrying perspectives difficult to share fully. Still, he accepted this as part of the work, understanding that connection often followed patience. Recognition arrived unevenly, sometimes late, sometimes unexpectedly, rarely in the forms he imagined. Such recognition mattered less than resonance, which he sensed when ideas found their way into other minds. He continued refining his ability to see wholes without ignoring parts. Details remained sacred because every small variation contributed to larger patterns. Travel sharpened empathy, forcing him to confront unfamiliar customs without reducing them to curiosities. Observation shifted inward as often as outward, revealing how perception shaped interpretation. Certainty remained provisional, always open to revision. Confidence grew slowly, grounded in sustained attention rather than authority. His voice matured, balancing wonder with restraint. The world appeared increasingly interconnected, yet increasingly fragile. Concern quietly joined curiosity. Responsibility deepened alongside understanding. Still, joy persisted, especially when learning felt communal. Curiosity remained the engine, never satisfied, never exhausted. He accepted complexity without demanding resolution, purpose clarified without narrowing. Movement continued, guided by questions rather than answers. Observation stayed central, imagination expanded responsibly. Connection intensified, understanding thickened. The horizon widened again. Silence retained meaning, wonder endured. The story leaned forward,